The story begins as we watch two different scenes. One scene is of a post-apocalyptic world where a couple goes their separate ways. The other scene is of a little girl waving goodbye as the plane is about to take off. In the romantic scene, the couple must find a way back to each other, but must quickly embrace as they prepare for impending doom. In the other scene, the little girl sees that it begins to snow, but is then mortified when the plane she was waving at catches fire and explodes right before her eyes. We are then introduced to Izumo. She just finished reading a romantic comic, and she wishes that her youth would have been more like the story she just read. She sighs in relief as she has finally finished the manga, which means she can now end her life. Just then, a guy with muscles that look like Terry Crews from White Chicks calls out to her and points out how obviously dangerous it is for her to stand there. She explains to him that all she ever wanted was a shot at passionate romance like the one in her manga. But because something's wrong with her body, that'll never happen. This is why she has chosen to die. This super dramatic girl threatens the man to not mess with her. But he doesn't seem to take her seriously at all. She continues her threat by revealing that anyone who touches her will contract an incurable disease and die. The bulging behemoth of muscles just calmly listens, and she reiterates that she has nothing good to live for with a body like hers. The emotional pain she feels causes her to close her eyes. But the walking mountain of muscles strangely just walks right into the knife she was threatening him with. She has no clue what's going on as she wonders if she stabbed him, and the man grabs her head. It turns out that he has never heard of a deadly disease transmitted by touch, but he thinks it's cool. The psycho points out that he's dead has been getting pretty stale, and he excitedly waits to feel the poison. He says that he touched her and is excited as he wonders if the poison's going to hurt. She tells him that her unlock is coming, and the guy is shocked as the cement beneath his feet breaks and his body gets introduced to a speeding train. Izumo's completely beside herself as she apologizes to the stranger for doing it again. She condemns herself for dragging another person into her problem and blames herself for taking too long to end it all. However, she is shocked to hear the guy's voice again and even more startled when his head rolls over to her. This guy is way too excited for someone who was just decapitated, and he realizes that this disease stuff she said was just a front to protect others. Izumo then watches in utter disbelief as the guy propels his head forward with his blood and reconstructs his own body.
Oi! Naruhodo na! Byokiってのは危険を伝える建前か!
何? さっきの人の頭！体が治ってる！
今日も俺はついてるぜ!
The human blood rocket determines that it's his lucky day since he found someone like her. But she isn't listening to a word he is saying. She is still completely shocked and frantically calls him a zombie as she gives him a painful punch and runs away. This guy is quick on his feet as he manages to propel his entire body to capture her, explaining that he is undead. He has some questions about the unlucky thing she mentioned, but the cops are on their way. He tells her to hold on and takes off like a blood-fueled jet. He wonders if she was impressed with his leaping abilities and explains that he simply regenerated his torn-off legs at high speeds and used the momentum to do it. Izumo completely ignores the regenerating psychopath and tries to get away. He just captures her again, but Izumo is quick to remind him that he's touching her, and he will trigger her unluck again. The guy won't be fooled and correctly points out that he should be okay as long as he only touches her clothes. She just wants him to let her go, but he points out that it's a long way down, and all he wants is more information about her unluck. Izumo freaks out for a bit, but soon realizes that she was planning on dying that same day. Anyway, she claims that his threats won't scare her, so he has the brilliant idea to just spin her around at absurd speeds. Izumo can hardly stand the psychopath's torture, and she frantically agrees to tell him everything afterwards. Her explanation starts 10 years ago, when she was only 8 years old. Her parents were heading overseas on business, and she was seeing them off. They said they'd be gone for a week, so they hugged her a whole bunch before they left. About half an hour later, their plane encountered unexpected engine trouble. All 270 people aboard, including her parents, died. It was then that she learned, although the degree of it varies, that people who touch her end up getting hurt. That's how she figured out that she caused what happened to her mom and dad. This is why she covers her bare skin from head to toe. She has a hard time speaking, as this is a very personal thing. She's telling this complete stranger, but he really interjects and hugs her. She wonders if he even listened to what she said, but he very much has. What he understood was that touching her brings out a stroke of unluck, and he has now decided to test it. She tells him that he needs to run while he still can, but it's too late, and a falling crate turns him into a banana pancake. Izumo takes this moment to get away from the flattened psychopath, but he quickly regenerates, unsatisfied with the results. Unfortunately for her, she slips on a banana peel and falls right off the building as the guy enjoys a snack. Izumo, in disbelief to be dying of a stray banana peel, the funniest sad way to die, points out that she never even had the chance to experience anything. As she falls, her precious manga leaves her pocket, and she begs and pleases that it does not end this way. The ground is quickly approaching, so she breaks down as she finally realizes that she isn't ready. Just then, our hero appears to grab her and her book. He uses his strange ability to slow them down and tells Izumo that there's no way that he's letting her die. This is because he believes that he has finally found the power that will give him a real death. He reveals that he knows there's a rule she tried to hide from him earlier. He thinks that if he can figure out what that rule is, then he can make an even bigger stroke of unluck happen. His goal is to bring out the greatest stroke of unluck she has in her in the hopes that he can finally end his ridiculously long life. He uses his admittedly gross power to fly again and declares that it's time to head back to his hideout and figure out her unlucky ability. However, in the distance, we see that he is being watched. The suit explains to someone that the human blood dispenser is en route to his hideout with what they call the new breed, and he is instructed to apprehend her. After confirming her ability at his hideout, the undead guy just discovered that how long he touches her correlates with the size of her unluck. The next test he wants to do is surface area, so he instructs her to take off her clothes so he can cling to as wide an area as possible. That doesn't happen. As she takes off running, she demands that he give up on his experiments, but he tells her that it's her fault for not just telling him how her unlock works. Unfortunately for her, she gets caught on a nail and loses her hat. Undead makes a joke about Rapunzel's hair, but she breaks down in tears. She can't believe that someone has seen her absurdly long hair, and she explains that no one's able to cut it for her since any hairstylist would just end up dead. Undead, the problem solver, breaks out some scissors and starts cutting away. He points out that as long as he is touching her, no unlock will come his way, so he will just finish up giving her a fresh cut in the meantime. This is true, but she reminds him that once he lets go, all the built-up unluck will hit him all at once. She fears how bad it will be, but he stops her and confidently explains that he is undead. Luckily for her, he was a stylist a long time ago, and he finishes up quickly. She is too hesitant to look, but when she does, she is glad. Izumo sees that he has let her go and thanks him. Undead, more excited than ever, points out that he held on to her for 15 minutes straight and expects that the next unluck should be a doozy. She has no clue what will happen, but we see that his head gets removed. It's the group from earlier, and he thanks Izumo for getting Undead to let his guard down. Before he explains who they are, he states that they will have to contain Undead in a special capsule first. She wonders why they did that and is shocked to be handcuffed. She thought they were on her side, but they laughed at her for being so naive. They explain that their job is to police any unselected negators, such as herself or any humors, that throw the world into chaos. Just like myself, she has no clue what they are talking about. And the guy goes on to explain that her ability is extremely unique. They have determined that her ability negates the luck of whoever touches her and kills them, an ability perfectly suited for murder. However, touching her through a cloth keeps her perfectly safe. He states that her ability's weakness is that once its conditions are known, it's easy to counter it with gloves. She realizes that they want to do something with her power, and they'll point out that obviously they want to use it for killing. He is sure that Undead wanted to use it for the same, since she would be quite the ferocious weapon if she bent to his will. Izumo finally speaks up and tells them that they are wrong, even if they just met. Undead only used her unluck on himself so that only he could die. She proclaims that that new zombie friend of hers isn't anything like him, but the suit doesn't want to hear it. He warns her to watch her mouth since he doesn't mind disposing of her instead of capturing her. Izumo breaks down in tears because, unlike everyone else, Undead touched her without an ounce of fear. She blames herself since this happened to him because he cut her hair, but she is grateful he did. She thanks Undead, and just then the suit holding Undead is struck by lightning. The other suits wondered if it was her unluck, but determined that it wasn't because the requirements were not met. They assume it was a stroke of his own unluck, but she tells them that they are wrong and that was no fluke. Just then, Izumo was elated to see that Undead had returned, and that the human blood rocket was furious. The suit states that guns are ineffective against Undead, and they have to attack them all at once to cut them down. Furthermore, he may be undead, but he's an amateur when it comes to combat. Undead is insulted to hear this. He explains that he might seem like an amateur fighter now, but the past is a completely different story. Usually he doesn't have enough space for so much information, so he puts a lid on his brain to keep 100 years worth of memories bottled up. Otherwise, he would lose his mind. With the thing removed from his brain, Undead regains all his knowledge of fighting and easily defeats the enemies. Undead just now realizes what happened. Getting his noggin sliced off wasn't her Unluck's doing. The Unluck for the haircut was actually that lightning bolt that was completely unexpected. And Undead determines that he needs to test for time lag in her ability. The suit realizes now that Undead isn't so simple, since the skills he cultivated through his very long life are also his weapons. The suit determines that he will have to implement a rather underhanded strategy and threatens to kill Izumo if Undead doesn't hand over his own head without regenerating. Izumo thinks that's pointless, but the suit explains to her that Undead seems to value her quite a bit. Undead is super disappointed that the guy won't fight him since he thought it would be fun, and he shocks Izumo when he starts taking his head off. Izumo begins a dramatic speech about how she can't see any more people around her getting hurt, but Undead isn't listening and has already chopped his head off. Undead states that he doesn't care a single bit about her emotions. He had fun all day and wants him to party up again if they somehow see each other again in the future. Undead hands over his head.
首をください。再生せずに。何ってお前が死なねえように首切ってんだろ。だ
からもうほっといて。私に構わず。話聞いてってば。
今日は楽しかったぜ。またどっかで会ったら遊ぼうぜ。
Which causes his body to be destroyed. As his head flies in the air, Izumo begins to think about what the truth is. She does know how to trigger the biggest stroke of Unluck. She frees herself from the suit, but thinks about how her plan might not go so well. She leaps into the air to give Undead's head a kiss on the cheek.
お前、今何を?
Leaving the suit to wonder what she did, she tells him that it was nothing special. She just thought it would be nice to cast all worries aside and touch someone. She knows that her Unluck is coming, and the suit has no clue what she is saying. But Undead seems to figure it out. He tells the Izumo to get out of there as he regenerates and tells the suit that he is done for. He explains that the moment the suit ran into the two of them, his luck ran out. Outside, the sky begins to light up, and Undead holds the suit as he looks up at the marvelous sight. It's a meteorite, and it completely destroys the entire building. Afterwards, Izumo worries about the zombie.
走れ! いいね! 最高だ! 隕石に当たるのは初めてだぜ.
But he will soon emerge from the smoke. His light-hearted attitude never changes, as he happily states that he has never taken a meteorite to the face before. She's glad to see that he is alive, and he compliments her on her good luck. The two finally introduce themselves, but Undead doesn't have an actual name. Izumo decides to give him one and chooses Andy because he's undead. He couldn't care less, and it's just amazing to see that a kiss caused all that destruction. Sometime later, Izumo, whose first name is Fuuko, thinks about how her Unluck always gets people killed. Because of this, she always felt that she didn't deserve to live. However, that's when she met Undead, who found her amusing. At first, she hated it, but being with him helped her feel like she could keep living a bit longer. That feeling didn't last long, however, as she learned how crude Andy is. His obsession with drawing out the biggest stroke of Unluck has caused him to come up with an idea. He points out how a simple kiss causes massive destruction and determines that being more intimate should bring a massive stroke of Unluck with unlimited destructive possibilities. Andy doesn't want to waste any time, but Fuuko is furious. She feels like he only thinks of her as a tool for dying and tries to figure out a way to get out of this situation. Fuuko comes up with a solution, and that is likability. Andy has no clue what she is talking about, so she explains that aside from her mom, dad, and him, she has also kissed her granddad, who, as a side note, had fake teeth so scary they could give a nightmare its own dreams. The only thing that happened to him from her kiss was sprained ankles. He passed away 3 years later, but there was too much of a time lag for it to be her Unluck's fault. Fuuko determines that this must mean that the more she likes a person, the bigger the unlucky event becomes. That means if he keeps trying to be intimate with her right now, then she will end up hating him forever, which will then lead to a crummy unluck, and he will lose his shot at a proper end to his life. Our boy, Andy, instantly realizes what the mission is. He tells her that all he has to do now is make sure she doesn't die until it happens. She wonders what he means by it, but he's already on the move. Moments later, Fuuko was shocked to be in an impressive armory with enough weapons to make John Wick blush. And Andy explains that he set up places like this all over the globe so he can battle it out with certain guys whenever he needs to. She has no clue who those guys are, but there's no time for questions. The gun-loving maniac protects his precious bringer of death by dressing her up like she's preparing for the apocalypse. She is now bulletproof, stab-proof, and even resistant to chemical weapons. He explains that it's a countermeasure against the guys that attack them. They are an organization that polices unidentified mysteries like themselves. To them, they're the ones that they have to keep in check. And it's almost guaranteed that a second group of them will be showing up soon. Izumo thinks they might have scared them by bringing down a meteorite from space and all, but Andy states that there's no chance that they are scared. The organization has massive firepower of its own. People just like them, guys and girls who negate the rules of this world. Happily, called negators, this organization got a front row seat to their unluck and undead abilities. But the abilities of the organization's members are unknown. They don't stand a chance, so Andy has decided that they need to run. He reveals that 50 years ago, those negators caught him and messed him up pretty badly. He spent the next 10 years in a lab, getting his body tested constantly. This makes Andy really curious about what they would do to Izumo if they caught her. There's no telling how many people would have their lives ended just to confirm the rules of her unluck. Andy shows a bit of how his crazy, dark, imaginative mind works as he points out that they might even cut off parts of her body to see if her unluck still works when detached. Izumo can't stand hearing that and instantly agrees that they need to run. They ride off on their adorable tandem motorcycle, and Andy shows that he can get hype no matter what the situation. Unfortunately, our carefree hero has no destination in mind, and his plan is to just keep running. Izumo feels like he has no plan. It's only a matter of time before they are caught, and she is already enough of a liability to him. She fears what will happen to him if they get caught like the day before. But he calms her down. He explains that she falls madly in love with him and gives him the biggest stroke of unluck possible. He promises he won't let her die. Izumo is shocked that he hasn't given up on her falling for him, but our confident protagonist guarantees it will happen. Just then the sky tears apart like a phone screen in a world without cases, and Andy explains that that is how they warp. The guys that captured him 50 years ago popped out of one of those sky hole things too. Something huge emerges from it, and Andy, recognizing it, immediately calls them the Union. The giant robot of destruction does some serious damage, and Izumo tries to rush towards Andy. However, she's pulled by a guy who can clearly tell she likes Undead by the way she was running. She determines that he must be an enemy, and she is shocked when she realizes that her legs won't move. The robot tells the guy to end the girl's life, since our orders are to capture Undead and dispose of the unluck. The guy wants to chat with her for a bit, but this only gives Andy time for a surprise attack. He goes in for a powerful strike, but Izumo is shocked when his body just stops moving. The guy with a neck as thick as a tree trunk promises that he isn't to blame, and Andy realizes that his body won't budge at all, specifically his arm, legs, and torso. Robocop lands a powerful punch, but this makes Andy realize something, as he can now move his body again. Izumo tries to tell him that Nexilla behind her is the movement stopper since he is stopping her from moving, but Andy points out that she is moving her hands right now. It's only her legs that aren't moving, so the two are definitely not related. He explains that both of these guys are external targeting restraining negators. They seem similar, but the ranges and abilities aren't. Robocop, in his suit, paralyzes his body, and he assumes that the blue-haired dude has her will. The problem is that he doesn't know exactly what they're negating to pull this off. The guy with the neck so thick he could wear a hula hoop as a choker is impressed that Andy figured out that much. However, he points out that simply knowing that doesn't mean a thing. Andy doesn't seem to care. Whenever that guy talks and takes a punch to test his theory, he finds that he is right since he can move just fine after getting hit. And he determines that all he has to do now is get hit, fix himself up, and punch the robot back. The overgrown toaster calls him an idiot, and the two go back and forth, exchanging punches. The blue-haired guy is impressed by Andy, considering he's enduring an immense amount of pain, but can't help but point out how outrageous his fighting style is. Izumo is frustrated when she wonders if they're going to get chased by people like them forever, and he tells her that it's only if they manage to keep getting away. He points out that the meteorite they used didn't help their case since it made their capture priority levels rise to 8 on a scale of 10, and she was only a 5 when she was first discovered. Now, no matter how many hunters they avoid, there will always be other menacing people gunning for them. She is shocked to hear that he means other negators like themselves, and she wonders why they aren't being haunted like them. Just then, the robot uses boosters to power up his punch and knocks Andy's head off. The guy with a neck so thick that all his scarves file for early retirement is glad to hear that they have Izumo interest. We finally learn that his name is Shen, and the robot wants him to stop answering her questions. Shen thinks she has the right to know, and she tells her that there are 10 members. They belong to the Anti-Unidentified Phenomena Control Organization, aka Union. Within its ranks, there's a special team made up of 10 negators. Once in, negators are exempt from pursuit on the condition that they commit to carrying out missions. There are a few tests that need to be passed first. Izumo is excited to realize that they could be safe if they become members, but the robot threatens her and explains that all the seats are taken as long as there are no vacancies. The roster shows no additions or changes, and a negator who isn't a member is Orma, a monster who throws the world into chaos. The robot prepares to end Izumo, but Andy instantly saves her. He listens to everything. He has decided that instead of getting haunted, they will just join the hunting party. He is super hyped about it and explains that they will just destroy these two guys to make space for them on the team. It's uncertain what they will make them do when on the team, but Andy once again promises that he will never let her die. Not only that, but handing her over to anyone is also not an option. With that said, Izumo knows exactly what to do and touches Andy's chest. The hunk of metal, just like the best man at a wedding, points out how they just made direct contact, but Shen says it was only a small area, so the Unluck isn't going to be that bad. Izumo, who has distanced herself, tells Andy that she is certain that huge Unluck is coming. Not wanting any misunderstandings, she explains that the massive size of the Unluck doesn't mean she is in love with him. She only likes him out of gratitude. The robot tries to tell Shen to go after the girl, but he doesn't respond well to being bossed around. Izumo continues to try and set things straight while Andy prepares for the Unluck. She confirms one last time that she's not falling in love with Andy, just as 18-wheeler makes an emphatic appearance and tells the two guys that it's time to give up their seats on the team. An 18-wheeler blows up all over them. They just barely manage to escape, and Andy leads them on a chase. He explains that negators either negate their own rules or those of others. When fighting against external targeting negators like them, you have to figure out what they are negating as soon as possible. And he shows that he's actually quite smart, as he has determined that when the Jumbotron gets an attack stance, he negates his movements, which should mean its power. It is called unavoidable. Shen is still a mystery, since he was able to restrain Izumo without any kind of specific movement. He decides to stay hidden and use some hit-and-run tactics till he figures them out. And he prepares for an attack we haven't seen yet, but is shocked to find that the building is filled with dynamite. Izumo rushes over, wondering if she's at fault for the explosion, and we see that the evil duo are still alive. The robot has had enough of the girl, since unless they can predict what will happen, her Unluck is not a weapon. It's a disaster. However, he decides that he will destroy the defenseless Andy first. He tells Shen that their mission is almost complete, but he is shocked when he realizes that Undead is actually the one behind him, and he tells them that he can have his hand since body parts that he loses disappear in 30 seconds anyway, and he prepares his next attack by biting down on his own finger. He bids farewell to the unavoidable and sends his fingertips straight through its robot brain. And he calls this his parts bullet. He uses his regenerative power to shoot his half-torn body parts like projectiles. He shows that he completely figured out the robot by pointing out that each time he got an attack stance, he negated his opponent's ability to avoid. Strictly speaking, he only stopped muscle movements while it was in effect. Unfortunately for the tin can, he couldn't stop Andy's regeneration. Shen arrived, shocked to see that the robot had been destroyed. Andy tells him that he is next, but Shen tries to point out that he just secured his seat on the team. Andy, ever the gentleman, says that he just secured Izumo's seat on the team, but he needs one too. Shen prepares for battle, and Andy wonders what he negates. He determines that he will just have to find out the same way he always does, and that's by getting his life ended over and over again. Andy initiates the fight by targeting the opening in Shen's stance with his right leg, but it's clear that he attacked with his left leg instead. Izumo arrives just in time to see that the two are battling it out. Shen can barely hold back his joy as he points out how amazing Andy is since he never thought anyone would be able to lay a hand on him. Shen would give anything to spar against him on a regular basis, and Izumo can't believe that they seem to have become friends. Andy thinks he is clearly just messing with him and tells Izumo to toss him his sword. Izumo fears that Andy won't catch the sword, but he tells her to throw it anyway. Andy continues fighting and states that he may not know exactly what Shen negates, but his power is all about opposites. Shen purposely teases a gap in his defenses and prepares the defense on the opposite side. Right goes left, and up goes down. It's incredibly annoying, but Andy determines that's all there is to it. Andy catches his sword with his neck just after figuring out his opponent and goes in to end the fight. Unfortunately, he has somehow stopped. Shen explains that it was only for a split second, but Andy hesitated on whether or not to cut him down. Shen is surprised since, despite being alive for nearly 200 years, he still hesitates when it comes to ending people. Either that, or perhaps he didn't want Little Miss Unlucky to see him take someone's life. Shen is now the one who's ready to end the fight, but Izumo heroically jumps in to unlock this fool. He avoids her easily. Shen won't reveal his rule to them, but does tell them that they won't be able to run away or touch him. His power works on their deep psyche, so it's no use trying to resist. Andy scolds Izumo for jumping in, but she points out that she was just trying to help. Shen asks which one of them will be joining the team, and Andy doesn't even hesitate, as it's clearly Izumo, and he's prepared to be taken away to a lab to be tested on. But Izumo reminds him how poorly they treated him and wonders why he would volunteer to go again. He explains that she wouldn't last a day there, but she is worried he might never be able to escape again. He tells her not to worry, since he guarantees to slip out before she dies. Even if it ends him, even if she becomes a hunchbacked old bag, he promises to win her heart. Andy tells the two of them to leave already, but Izumo tells them to wait. She tells Shen to look away, but he explains that he can't since it will undo his ability. She tells him that he has to, and it shocks everyone. When she reveals that she's going to get intimate with Andy, Andy reminds her that she has to fall head over heels for him first, but she tells him to shut up because of how messed up her body is. She has never experienced even a tiny bit of romance. She has no clue if she has fallen for him or not, but he is someone who is willing to fight for her pitiful sake until he's a bloody mess. This is why she can't just abandon him without giving up something that just might give him the unluck need to end himself. She dramatically apologizes for not being able to do more to repay him, but this just makes Shen break out in uncontrollable laughter. Their relationship is hilarious to him, especially since they just met one day ago. There's such a comedic duo that Shen thinks splitting the two of them up would be a capital offense. Instead, Shen shockingly states that he will have the two of them kill another one of the members of his team. If they do, he will put in a good word for both of them. He explains that in 3 days at Lake Baikal, one member will make a move to investigate a UM. If they end this member that shows up there, then they are golden. This person will be wearing a red necktie and an emblem. Before he leaves, he warns them that there will still be people hunting them along the way. He hopes that they both make it in one piece so they can meet again at the round table and leave. Izumo is shocked that he spared them, and Andy points out that it was because of her deviant behavior. She tells him that she was serious about what she said, but Andy is a man of impeccable honor and tells her that he doesn't want to do things that way. It was completely reckless. He orders her to never pull a stunt like that again, and she agrees. Their next stop is Russia, but Izumo points out that she doesn't have a passport. That's okay since our crazy hero doesn't trust public transportation. The plan is to drive at top speed to Nagata. Next, they will hop on his yacht and book it to a Russian port. Then they will swap to a jet plane and head to Kutski, where he will hire some of his old war buddies to give them some combat support. Then they lie in wait for their target at the lake and end them. And he's more hyped than ever to be going to Russia, where there's plenty of vodka. He's glad to hear that Izumo is 18 years old, which is the legal drinking age there. And our crude protagonist promises that they will have a drink when they are done.
Just take you